All right, my friend, here we are with some additional insights and reflections on day 4 in our 40-day walk through Abraham's life. Not a great day for Abraham, but great conversation ahead. I hope you've had a chance to both read, react to what you've been reading, like I did here with my green, yellow, reds. Drop your green, yellow, reds there, jot them down, and then add them to our this week's conversation in our Facebook group, so that when our next Q&A comes up, we'll have some great stuff to discuss. Because all of your comments and thoughts and highlights, that's going to drive the conversation. There's so much to talk about. We got to focus in on what you want to talk about. So go ahead and add those in every day, along with anything else you want to talk about. Add them into that Facebook group, and I'll be pulling from that when we get to our Q&A. So today, I pulled up here a reading guide once again, and I just thought it'd be worth a few minutes of our time to reflect and respond a little bit to this wild story from Abraham's life. You know, if we thought that Abraham was going to be this kind of airbrushed and saintly figure floating above the problems of life, we're finding out today that is certainly not the case. And he's got some hang-ups and some worries and some doubts. And I would love to know what you're thinking about him so far. In fact, that's where the first question for today's reflection kind of takes us. What do you think? It's opinion time for you. What do you think of Abram's decisions that he makes today and the logic behind them? What do you think? Now, most of us are going to say, yeah, lying about Sarah, getting her kind of, traded off to Pharaoh for an assortment of cattle and, is not great. And you would not be alone in that assessment. That's absolutely not great. It also doesn't mean that God approves of it. It's just what's happening here. And in fact, the fact that Abram does this kind of stuff, I find it actually gives us great insight into, the nature of faith itself. What does it mean to be God's friend and to walk through life with God? Clearly, it doesn't mean walking out a flawless life, because Abram has already shown us he's not capable of that. So what do you think about Abram's decisions and the logic behind them? I'm curious what your thoughts might be. I'll tell you, and then where you think he went off track, I'll tell you that this may sound a little odd, but I think Abram's decisions make all kinds of sense in definitely in a warped kind of twisted way. They make all kinds of sense, right? He's about to cross the border. I don't know if you've ever been maybe you've traveled or maybe you've been to some places that you go, it's a little bit scary. I've been to some places like that, right? And you're at the point where, this passport control or security is coming up and you're thinking, this is about to get, icy dicey and I got to do something to fix it, right? So he's in this intense moment of of being afraid. He's scared. He's maybe starving. They're hungry. They're desperate. And he's in a place he never thought he'd be. Here he is, right? And so he feels like he's got to take matters into his own hands, and that's the part where I think he goes off track. For when I see this, I see, look, his calculations were correct about Egypt. It's a dangerous place. I don't want to be here. I don't feel like I have a lot of power in this situation, right? I'm at the mercy of people, and they're unpredictable. And they're gonna see, in this case, they're not real principled type people. All right, they're gonna see Sarah, they're gonna want her, and I might, all that makes sense. Okay, that part is maybe feels is kind of close to reality. All right, where does he go off track? I'll tell you. To me, it's because he didn't include God and God's promise to him in the story he's telling himself. And so in that sense, he doesn't actually have the whole picture, right? Is it not true that God called him out of Ur and he led him to Canaan, right? Is that not true? And then did God not promise that I'm going to give this land to your descendants? And again, Abram doesn't have any children. That's a big plot in the story too. He's worried about that, right? So it's not like he's forgotten that. And and all of that he's forgotten. The story he's telling himself there as he reaches the border checkpoint in Egypt is a story where he's by himself. He has to figure this out. He's out of options, and it opens the door for him to play his final card to try to manipulate the situation into a way that's going to work out for him, right? And so there's where he goes off track. And here to me is where we can kind of look under the hood of this moment and to see some clues about faith, right? And that's what we're doing with Abraham's whole story, right? So, man, thanks, Abram. Sorry you've been through so much, and you too, Sarah. But thank you for the chance to talk about it. Really, but what we're seeing here to me is that faith. It extends beyond intellectual knowledge and agreement, right? You do have to know some things about God and like affirm them in an intellectual way, but there's more to it than that. Faith is more than just saying, "Yeah, God, you're right, you're smart, I'm dumb, you know the way, I don't, I should listen to you more," right? Like that. It's not a matter of like, well, if on the quiz of life, God gets 100 and I get a 50, and if I trusted God, I would trust his answers more. Like it's more than that. In fact, if I'm to put it in the simplest of terms, faith equals trust. Faith equals trust. Faith is putting your weight on the rope and dangling from it. It's the weight, it's the rope rather of who God is and what God has promised. And here's what's wild. Here's the thing, that faith actually, if we're really honest with ourselves, that kind of putting the weight of your fate in God's hands, it feels like a risk, right? If you really understand what you're doing. Now there are people who are like, hey, faith over fear. Like, no. If you really know the stakes, it's not just a throwaway line to say, hey, I'm gonna trust God here. It feels like a massive risk, but the truth is, the real risk is to hang the weight of our lives and our futures anywhere else on any other rope, right? And think about Abram today. Man, he ends up in his efforts to reduce the risk that faith presents, trust that, hey, what God said he's going to do. In his attempt to minimize that risky move, he actually puts himself, his wife, and Pharaoh all at risk, at huge risk. So the real risk all along here was not to give God a chance to solve this in a way that lines up with who he is and what he's promised. The real risk is taking on the weight of solving this problem on himself, and he puts everybody there at risk. Which is kind of wild, right? Counterintuitive, but it's true. In fact, it makes me think there's a verse in the New Testament in Hebrews that sums this up so well. Take a look at this. I want to show it to you. I got my Bible open here, and it's very appropriate to go here to Hebrews chapter 11, because this whole section here, it really is actually, in fact, you'll even see Abraham's name comes up. Hebrews pulls from these Old Testament stories to build the case for a life of faith with God and what it means to have that kind of life. And so this is very appropriate for our conversation today. Look at this verse. It's verse 6 here, Hebrews 11:6. And it says, and it's impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. That's a big statement. Impossible to please God without faith. And here's a little episode from Abram's life that shows us that, right? We can, if I can, like Abram knew literally in his memory bank when God is the episode where God says, leave go where I'll show you. In his memory bank is the promise from God that I will give you this land. Like that exists. And if in this moment, Abram wouldn't deny that those things happened. But then he's having a hard time in this new situation, right? Acknowledging that God exists here in this moment, in this story, and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. In other words, the path of walking out life with God and in his way is the rewarding path. This is what pans out in the end. Right? Abram has a hard time with that. And so the result, is that he puts everyone at risk. So as we look at the reading guide, put yourself behind the eyes of each character in the story. What's it like to be Sarai? Oh wow, okay, she's in a no-win situation. She get caught lying to Pharaoh. That's not good. If she doesn't lie, Abram's going to look at her and think, you put my life at risk. I mean, what's she supposed to do? What is she supposed to do? Abram's lack of willingness to bring God into the sticky situation they are in is putting her at risk. And Pharaoh too. Now Pharaoh, I mean, doesn't need to be out here trying to grab all these wives, and that's all that it applies here. However, man, he stepped on a bear trap out here, didn't he? Terrible plagues. Okay, that's nice. They're lucky that Pharaoh, all he does is escort them to the border, man. It gets messy when we fail to bring the reality of God's existence and the truth of his promises into our stories. It's easy to be critical of Abraham here for sure. And yeah, he deserves all the flack he's getting. But here, let's not only be critical, let's be a little reflective too and ask ourselves, hey, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like your only option was to get creative? What about right now? Are you in the middle of a bad idea that you're kind of jamming through because you don't feel like God has your back? It's okay to admit it. It's okay to admit that. In fact, it's smart before it's too late, right? This is the time to admit it. If you when you find yourself in a spot where you're kind of at the border of your own kind of Egypt, right? And the risks are high. You're scared. You don't want to be there. You see all kinds of ways things could go wrong, and you don't see any way that things could possibly go right. You know what I'm saying? Man, I've been there. In fact, this is kind of my default in a lot of ways. I'm a creative person. And, I've subscribed to the school of thought, where when God closes a door, he opens a window. That's been a big part of my approach to life has been, where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah, God said no here, but I'll get creative over here and find, I'm learning that maybe that's an instinct I need to be really careful about. It's okay to not get discouraged or not take no for an answer on something you feel like God's really asking you to do. But on the other hand, getting creative, kind of shading the truth a little bit, or worse of all, just telling myself a story about the situation I'm in that does not include truth about God and about what he's promised me and what he cares about. That's not good. That's an instinct in me that needs to be shaped and changed by the Holy Spirit. And so when I find myself in one of these, famine situations, something beyond my control, it comes up, forces me down to the Egyptian border of life, right? I want to change my approach. Imagine if Abram had gone with a different approach. What if he had followed the approach of including God inside of his story, right? Okay, they're there at the border, and Sarah's with him, and he's like, okay, instead of panicking here, that's a legitimate response. There's a lot to be afraid of. I'm not foolish for being afraid, but I need to not let that fear cause me to react. All right, in a way that subtracts God from the story. So I'm here. I'm going to affirm God's here. I'm going to say God's not a liar. And I'm going to say that walking his path is the only path that's going to pan out in the end, right? I'm going to tell myself that. Imagine, God, imagine Abram had said something like that to Sarai, how the story would have been different. Hey, Sarah, I guess when we're about here at the border, I'm scared. Are you scared? I'm scared. I don't know how this is going to go. These guys, Egypt, it's wild down here. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't see a way that this ends well for me. You're beautiful, and I feel like I'm scared. I'm at risk. All right, but here's the thing, Sarah. We're here because we've followed steps that God has given us that's led us to this moment. And here's the thing, God does exist, not just intellectually, like, yeah, I believe in God. I believe God is here in this moment with us. He is here. This is his story. He's in the story with us. I believe that we need to give him a chance to solve this problem we can't solve on our own. Let's not do something hasty that subtracts him from the story. Let's put the weight of our fate in God's hands and see what happens. Imagine responding to the threat that Egypt represents here in the story like that. God, you're in the story with me. Your promises are real. I'm hanging my fate on the rope of your promises and your existence with me right here. Imagine that. And that kind of mindset, that's life of faith. We get this as we wrap up. Here's something to remember. Look, even though Abram doesn't take that path, this does not go well today. But look, don't you love this? Even when Abram gives up on God, God doesn't give up on him. God intervenes. He gets booted out of Egypt with all the stuff with him, and God sends him back to Canaan where he belongs. Don't you love that? God intervenes with grace. There is grace. There is grace for you and me when we subtract God from the conversation. God doesn't subtract us from his promise. I love that.